Now let's take a look again at where we're at in terms of simulating this machine. I'm going to use the test mode, and so we'll see that we might not be quite getting what we expected when we run this. Everything looks like it's quite in place when we first start running, but then when I actually run, we see that the wheels pop out on either side. The body of the whole forklift pops up, and then, well, the wheel just fell over. And of course, as before, we have our little pivot that just fell through the ground. That's because we selected to create the body of the machine as a convex mesh. And so there's actually an overlap between the collision geometry of the body and the collision volumes for the wheels and the back wheels that we have on this model. Now, to correct this, what we can do is create a rule that will tell Vortex that it should not consider collisions between these different elements. Now, the place where I can create that rule is the assembly. So what I'll do here is I'm going to double click on my assembly, which is my collection of all the parts. Of course, right now that represents all the parts we've made so far. And so within the assembly, I'm going to go in and choose under basics that I want to create collision rules. So I can just double click on this and it will add collision rules here inside of the Explorer. Now, as I select collision rules, on the right hand side is where I can actually define what the rules are going to be. Now, in this case, I could specify 3 rules where I could say that one of the wheels does not interact with the body, then the other wheel, and then the third one. Or I can take a shortcut and just specify that anything that's inside of my assembly is not going to collide with anything within my assembly. So that would mean that the vehicle cannot have any collisions between its own parts. It can collide with other elements that are going to be in the larger simulated scenario, but within itself, it won't compute or try to detect collisions. Now, I've selected assembly on both sides of this rule, and then lastly, we have here a checkbox called collide. Now, if we check that box, it will consider collisions, which is the default behavior. If we don't check that box, it will stop considering collisions between the two elements in the rule. So if we go in and run the simulation, what I'll see is that the body here actually just fell through the wheels, which is what we expected. Now it's no longer looking into whether or not we have a collision, and my little cylinder just fell through the ground as before. The back wheels are also here solidly within the envelope of the body, so everything is now no longer colliding.